Um, so Boker Tov. Let's start with our bracha for reading Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Now, the last time we met, we started looking at the Birkot HaBoker, these morning blessings, and Sylvia brought up a question offline, and I thought, Sylvia, maybe you want to, and I didn't really understand the question, so maybe you want to jump into it and help
Well,
us.
okay, so I was wondering, actually, we were wondering, a couple of us were wondering, how in the world did this become the morning, the miracles?
Oh,
Uh,
because the in the Reformed liturgy it says daily miracles or something
Daily
like that.
miracles, yes. And it just seems kind of a big jump.
Well, because every single one of these things is a Dayenu kind of statement. It's as simple as that. I mean, maybe not every single one. That we actually are about to do three that are not as much that, but the idea is that every day that we wake up, it is pretty much an act of Tichiyat HaMetim, resurrection of the dead. When we're asleep, we're like we're not alive, in the
But
eyes of the rabbis.
it
So,
just seems like the reform has just a different view of it. They look at it, it's a much bigger deal. It's not, you know,
oh, I don't think
um,
it's a bigger deal. I don't
oh,
actually
okay.
agree with that. It's just a from a pragmatic. So, by the way, when I talk about reform liturgy, in my heart, in my subconscious actions, I do so b'shem mori, in the name of my teacher, Rabbi Ben Hollander, alav hashalom. He was a great teacher, conservative rabbi who lived in Jerusalem in 1992 when I was a student there. And in the class that I took with him, we opened up the Reform Siddur, at the time it was Gates of Prayer, and looked at how the liturgy played out there, and then did a compare contrast with what the book known as Siddur Rinat Yisrael, which is sort of a standard Orthodox prayer book in Israel, how they conceptualized the prayer. And so we would look at prayers like this and try to understand, why did reformers do it this way versus that way. I think that the reason that it feels like a bigger deal in Reform Judaism is accidental. It has to do with the fact that as a formula, it's very pedagogically powerful, right? Like you basically can, a student reading these prayers can gain a sense of mastery much more quickly than many other prayers, because it's so repetitive. It's a mantra, right? Every single one of them begins with Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, and then ends with something. And so there's just a nice rhythm to it. And so I think Reform rabbis who are trying to teach Hebrew have just found this to be a helpful prayer for getting students further along. That's all.
Well, I just, in half the time we don't even have a minion at this point,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well,
it's
in
something
most
that you can
Reform,
do without a minion, and it's usually kind of, not rushed through, but it's like, okay, let's do it. I can't remember the melody in the
so you're
conservative.
comparing it between the conservative experience that you've had and what you see in Reform synagogues.
Right, and also, I mean, Orthodox, it's just part of getting to the Torah service and hoping that by the time you get to the Torah service, you will have a minion.
So the daily minyan in Pico Robertson at B'nai David, which is a modern Orthodox shul, and many other minyanim that I've encountered along the way, have made this the first thing they do at the minyan. They don't start with Matovu. That's too like dramatic and non-theological, and you don't have to say it to fulfill any. You don't. There's a goal of fulfilling mitzvot, and one of the ideas is that you say 100 blessings a day. Well, here's like a big chunk of those, so that's part of that too. So I don't think it's really as theologically driven, philosophically driven. It's pedagogically driven that in Reform synagogues it is a feature of B'nai Mitzvah. So, okay, Pamela.
I wanted just to ask, the title says weekday morning blessings, and what Sylvia is keying in on is the Shabbat morning service.
Yeah, they're
and
exactly the
and
same.
I know they're exactly the same, but I think what happens in the Reform, at least at our synagogue, is that we normally aren't exposed to these, but it is the first, like in my experience with the Bar and Bat Mitzvah students, it's the first prayer that they're going to lead the congregation in, so it gets a special emphasis just because it's the warm up of their intention and their voice, and I really like that's the first part that we hit when we have the service on Saturday morning.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the one. Yes, go ahead.
Well, I'm just asking the importance in a person's life in being able to do this. It's not like, a prayer before or after the Haftorah. It's not like blessing, doing an aliyah. In a person's personal life, it's great that we do this for, getting up in front of people and, leading services. But I'm not going to be leading services. I'm going to be, reading Torah and doing Haftorah and, So that's why I was wondering why the importance of it in someone's personal life.
I think it's also just in Reform Judaism, since it's done out loud, it's really not done out loud in most shuls. It's usually mumbled. And even the way I do it at B'nai Jacob on Saturday, like this Saturday, I say it very quickly and people say Amen to each line. And that's just, But in Reform Judaism, we like to engage in imagery and prayers that feel it's kind of a hippie prayer. Let's be real. It's a little bit more hippie. And some people like that. At least the way we do it.
It's a lot easier than some of the other stuff that we're trying to learn. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it is. It's easy. That's a big part of this. But it is kind of a beautiful litany, especially the way it's been modified in Reform Judaism. So let's actually, unless there's anything else on this, let's jump into the contrast between this and the Reform versions. I should have pulled that up, actually. That would be something for me to, maybe I can still do that. It'll take a little bit of work. But let's take a look at this. Maybe we'll just run through this and then we'll go back and look at how Reform deals with this. So we already discussed last week this first one. And is it large enough, or would people like it larger? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay?
It's fine.
Okay. Thanks. So this one we discussed last week, how the difference was in the translation, but Birkot Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. So that, which we call, by the way, that phrase, that first part in Jewish parlance, this part is called Shem Umalchut. Shem Umalchut. I haven't mentioned that before, but I realized I never mentioned that before. Shem meaning name, and Malchut meaning sovereignty or rulership. So the first part of all of these prayers establishes both who we're talking about and their role in our lives. Shem, the name is Yud He Vav He, right? So that's the God we're talking about. Baruch atah Adonai, or Yud He Vav He, or Tetragrammaton, or Shem U'Meforash, or whatever you want to call this special name for God, who is our God, and then Malchut. You mentioned that God is a Melech Ha'olam, right? So we're establishing that this prayer emphasizes God as the centerpiece and God as a power, as a force, as the one that we are serving, right? So generally speaking, most of our prayers have this formula, and you're like, well, where did that formula come from? It's discussed in our sources as being a way to identify God and to create a rhythm with it. Now, Reform Jews and liberal Jews in general, and certainly Marcia Falk, a modern-day liturgist, have played with this because, first of all, Adonai, Yud He Vav He, being pronounced as Adonai, refers to God as Lord, right? And Adon is a lord, as in a master over others. And people feel that that's rather patriarchal, so they struggle with that. And Melech, as king or ruler, is also hierarchical, not just patriarchal, which Adonai is, but in a way it's both patriarchal and hierarchical. And Reform Jews and liberal Jews in general struggle with this idea of a God who has this type of power and us being servants of that God. So we tend to under-express the way in which we are subjects of this powerful God. But if you look at the liturgy and if you look at the history of the Jewish approach, we are absolutely subservient to God. And then what ends up happening is Midrash enters in there because we're not comfortable with that. And we emphasize other things, such as the idea that we wrestle with God, right? And we celebrate the idea that we wrestle with God. But our wrestling with God is with an understanding that God is our ruler. So I'm saying it this way because the liturgy is very clear. How we interpret this liturgy and the tradition of the interpretive process is a big part of why Judaism, and I'm not saying Reform Judaism, I'm saying Judaism, is a religion that can work in a modern world where there are doubts about this God that is all-powerful. But if you look at the sources themselves, the sources are unadulterated, 100% clear that we are subjects of God. We are servants of God. We say, Ana Avda de Kudasha B'richu. We are servants of the Holy One of Blessing. We actually say that in the morning liturgy. We say we're servants. Avda, Eved, same word. We are slaves of that God. But we don't live in that mentality. We use our capacity for midrash, for interpretive process, the way we emphasize certain alternative sources. But all of that is to say that there are communities in which this Shem U'Meforash is not the way it's set up, and they change the language. And you'll see that in Reconstructionist circles, and you'll see it in renewal circles, that this Shem U'Meforash, this Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, is substituted with things like Brucha at Yah, Eloheinu Malkat Ha'olam, right? Because they want to say this language is too much of a patriarchal, male-dominated view. And I think they're right that it's very easy when you say this over and over again, as I think it's... What was the name of that answer? There's an anthropologist who said, as long as God is male, males will be gods. And I think that there's something to that. But that being said, I tend to be a traditionalist, and I think it's important to ensure that we know the language of history and then we have to do everything we can to blow up any assumption of what it looks like. Any questions on that?
Yeah. There's the interpretation of where you put slave and servant as interchangeable, and I understand that I've read that before, but I would disagree as far as Judaism looking at it as a slave. I think it's more servant and servitude, and I think there's a distinct difference between being a slave, one that's, I wouldn't say, beaten down as a slave, making you do something that you don't want to do and still have to do it, compared to a servant where you're gaining something. If you look at it as a servant that's being paid, and you're actually gaining things from the servitude.
Okay, thank you for that, Irvin. Sylvia?
So I just wanted to share, there is a new person coming to our synagogue. She just retired. She's a rabbi that Jonathan knows, Rabbi Aviva Ehrlich, and she has this notebook that she takes with her, and it's got the female gendered version of prayers. And when she does an aliyah, she always says, I'm doing the female gendered version when they're new people, and she reads it, and a lot of people are very annoyed and mad. And one person says, if we're going to do that every day, I'm leaving. But I just think it's cool. It's fun to hear it. As long as no one's telling me I have to do it one way or another, I'm fine. But it's very creative. She's been spending all this time translating everything into the female form of the prayers. So just wanted to share that that's really true, what my brother said.
Yeah. Well, so when Marcia Falk did some of her creative liturgy, there's a book called The Book of Blessings. I think, Pamela, you're familiar with it. When she started creating new liturgy, she wrote an essay in the now defunct Tikkun magazine, in which she discussed the idea that we say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam so much, so often, that the sheer grandeur of that language is lost. And we don't think about it. Even the way we do the morning blessings in the Orthodox shul, you say it really quick. So it would be like this, just looking at the text. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher natan l'sech v'dina l'avchim ben yom u'ben layla. Amen. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shelo asani goy. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shelo asani aved. Right? And no one is thinking about the Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. But if you listen to those words, they're powerful words. So what Marcia Falk argues, and I think she's right about this, is that if we just let it be what she calls dead iconography, then we lose sight of the grandeur of the imagery. Blessed are you, Adonai, this particular name for God, which connotes compassionate God, a God of love, a God that is also has a mastery because of the way we say it as Adonai, as opposed to Elohim. Our God. Wow. So we're talking about a God that we have a special relationship with. Melech. This God is not at our shlav, at our level. It's God. This God is a melech, is a king. A king. And what does king create? It's not just the negative of the melech, it's also the positive of the melech. Like, how nice it would be, as my sister once said probably 30 years ago, and I never forgot it, is how nice it would be if we could live under a benevolent dictatorship where we didn't have to fear, we didn't have to be afraid, but we also knew that we were cared for. I know you don't remember that. But you did say that, because I wouldn't remember something like that. Melech haolam. Okay, olam is this beautiful word that's a combination of world, universe, but also time is implicit in it. So like there's so much depth to these words. So every once in a while, utilizing a different language helps us to view God in a new way. So if we use a name like Shekhinah, which has a feminine aspect in its connotation, or we say Sur Yisrael, Rock of Israel, that's another image of God. And if you go on Sukkot to doing Hoshanot, where you go around the synagogue with the lulav and etrog, you hear a gazillion names for God, each one of them enriching the sense of what God is. So whether it's traditional images or modern, ways in which, we talk about God as Kol Damama Dakad, the still small voice. These are all images of God that enrich our understanding of what God's potential could be. Okay. And then we did discuss the first one, Asher Natan L'Sechvi V'ina Lavchin Ben Yom U'Vein Laila, who gave us understanding to distinguish between day and night, but literally it is a sechvi, which is a rooster. So we discussed last week or whenever we met that the rooster knows before the daylight, before sunrise, that the day is coming and says cock-a-doodle-doo. And we compared how we say it between Ethel's kukuriku and Sylvia's cock-a-doodle-doo and Penina's or whatever it was that you did. That was kind of amazing, actually. You did it masterfully. Do you do moose also, by the way, Pam?
Do I do what?
Do you do moose? What does a moose say?
I don't have that one.
Okay.
Sorry.
Put me on the spot. That's okay. So anyway, the very first of these blessings is this idea of, when we're and so each of these prayers is going to, well, not all of them, but most of them parallel certain things that we do in the morning. Like, for instance, we wake up, and that's what this first one is. Thank you, God, for implicitly letting me wake up through some force that I don't understand, in the same way that the rooster, through some force that I didn't understand, wakes up. Okay, and I'm going to go out of order because I think it'll help us a little bit to understand this prayer. And I'm going to scale up. We're going to skip the next three for this moment. And then we go to Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam pokeach ivrim. Again, I kind of ignored those first 6 words. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. Because dead iconography, we're all subject to it. We all just can't think about God's, magnificent presence all day and all night. We live in a real world. So what do? We're like, okay, what are the last words going to be? Especially when we're new to Hebrew, because we're afraid, like, oh, am I going to stumble on those words, right? How many of you are reading this and saying, oh, I'm going to pay attention to the last couple words because those are the words that are new? So, pokeach ivrim, God opens the eyes of blind people. So when you wake up in the morning, what's the first thing you do? You open your eyes. And so, thank you, God, for opening up my eyes, because I was like a blind person until I woke up. Thank you, Rooster. And now I'm able to open up my eyes. That's a miracle. So to go back to your question, Sylvia, it's a daily miracle. And then, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, malbish arumim, who clothes the naked. Well, what do you do in the morning? You got to get dressed. I always pictured this as the firefighter who, jumps into his, he's in his Gatkes, right? And then he jumps into his fighter suit and is ready to go. So we give thanks to God who allows us to get dressed. But it's in this beautiful image. Pokeach Ivrim, opens eyes of blind people. That's a miracle if that were to happen. And so similarly, it's like we were blind. So it's a taste of blindness. And God allows our eyes to open. God allows those who are naked, people who don't have clothes, right? We live in a world where everyone has clothes, even poor people. But imagine a world in which we didn't have that. Or another way to say it is, unlike animals that have no intention of getting dressed, God gave us all these faculties that enable us to recognize our nakedness and then the desire to cover up, which is exactly what Adam and Eve did. So, Malbish Aramim, God literally causes clothing to get onto those who are arom, naked. And I mentioned the Garden of Eden because that's the word that's used, arumim, in the Garden of Eden, that Adam and Eve were naked. And so then God gave, and remember, it was because they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and bad that Adam and Eve ended up putting a fig leaf over themselves, right? Or some sort of a branch, some sort of covering. So it's enlightenment also, when Malbish Arumim is also being enlightened. And then Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Matir Asurim. Blessed is God who frees the captive, or makes releases, gives a heter, right? Opens up those who are confined. Well, you're in bed. I mean, it's a little bit out of order, but when you're Matir Asurim, let's see what the footnote they say. He releases the prisoners of misfortune, passion, sin, hatred, and jealousy. Well, that's an interesting comment. But on the most basic level, when you're in bed and you're under the sheets, you're kind of like you're confined, and then you get out of the bed. It's a little out of order because we just got dressed first. Okay, and then Zokef Kifufim. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler, powerful king of not just me, but of the entire universe of space and time. Zokef Kifufim, straightens those who are crooked. Right? When you're in bed and you're kind of contorted in a shape, or if you're a baby to be born and you're still embryonic and you're curled inside the womb, then God straightens us out. Right? That's a miracle. You have to think of it as a miracle. And I'm going to say about that, you know, when people are bedbound for a long time, Sylvia knows this because we saw this with our mom who had Parkinson's, our bodies contort in strange ways. And it's a little discomforting when you see someone who can't physically be manifesting in the way that we are in this world. So it is kind of a miracle that we can have our bodies straightened out when we are bent over in one way or another. And left to our own devices, our bodies will, through atrophy, take strange positions. I just think about my mom's feet, quite honestly, in those last days of her life. So that is a miracle. That is a miracle, da, 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 to quote Fiddler on the Roof. So, you know, why are these miracles, Sylvia? Because they're miracles. To go back to the first comment. Okay, and then Rokaha Aretz al Hamayim, God who spreads the earth above the waters, right? The Rakia is the, I guess you could say like the firmament, whatever that is. Over the waters. I think it's the division, right, between sky and ocean. But I don't really know what this one is. Anybody have an idea? What would that parallel in terms of our starting our days? I don't know. And there's not really a lot of commentary here. I don't even see a commentary section.
Well,
I
it would be the flooding to prevent, it's miraculous that we have the separation of the earth and the waters.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah. I
I mean, I
mean,
think
yeah, go ahead.
I just think it evokes creation, and as we get up in the morning, we are recreating our day, our life every day anew.
Right. You
And
know, and Rokah haaretz, yeah, I mean, that makes me think of Rakia Kirtsono, Bore Yom Valayla Golel Or Mipnei Choshech, what we say in the Ma'ariv Aravim prayer about the separating of day and night. The source here mentions Psalms 136, God who spreads the earth over the water, his steadfast, Kile Olam Chasto is this. Okay? And then the next one, She'asa li kol tzorki, who made for me all of my needs. Anybody know what that one references? I know what some rabbis say it is. Anybody have a guess?
Well, I imagine you can eat and you're alive.
Yeah, I mean, the specific thing that I've heard people reference this to be about is shoelaces.
Is what?
Shoelaces. Because, you put your shoe on and you need to have a way to keep them on. So someone invented shoelaces. I don't know. That's just an idea. Okay, and then Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Hamechin Mitzadei Gaver, who makes each step firm. That's shoes, right? Where every step that we take, it's a miracle that we have the ability. I mean, put aside the Kenyans that are running, marathons barefoot. Most of us need shoes, and those shoes protect our feet, and that is a miracle too.
Rabbi?
Yeah, go ahead, Pamela.
One time, when we had all of the people in captivity in Gaza, I was listening to an Orthodox rabbi, and he was suggesting that if you say the daily blessing, that you shouldn't use Matir Asurim to talk about the release of those captives, because these prayers are meant to deal with your personal experience in your own enslavement, I guess, or it's like it isn't meant to ask for the release of the captives, and I just wanted to know if by saying that it's about tying your shoelaces, that somehow you're dumbing down the meaning of the blessing of being provided for all you need.
Well, that's an interesting thought. Probably for that rabbi, they would say that, but I would disagree with that rabbi that the original sources of this are pretty clearly about a bigger picture than saying. I mean, we do have other language. We talk about, taking people out of the darkness and into the light. There's a harachaman that's in the Birkot Hamazon that many, it's probably an add-on from Reform circles, but we talk about going me'afela le'ora, from darkness into light, and that was tied to hostages. I don't know. I like thinking of it that way, and I don't think it dumbs down. I mean, the thought that comes to mind when you say that is Heschel, who in the book The Prophets, which is a masterpiece, it was initially his dissertation, and he published it. He talks about how for the prophets, it's the really small things that are of infinite importance. So, if you cut someone off on the freeway, it's not just that you were not a nice guy that day. It's a human tragedy that you would do that. And so the standard of the prophets is way up here. And I think in the same way, it is very easy to overlook miracles. And maybe the text is actually telling us, so I might disagree with this rabbi. I think the text is teaching us to slow down and realize how many miracles happen every day we wake up. And each and every one of these is a miracle.
Rabbi, I totally agree with you that with all the miracles abound like that. And I think what it teaches us is to be grateful for it. By being grateful for all these miracles, it can make you happy. Once you're grateful to be able to have your feet on the ground and stand up and breathe and have a separation of the waters from the earth, that you're not drowning, to be able to, meet the day with some sunshine out there. It's a miracle all around us, because it's such a fine line between death and life, and being healthy, good healthy, and bad healthy. And as soon as you change that balance, it's not there anymore. And you can understand how miraculous it is to have good health, or just to be able to breathe unencumbered.
Right. Definitely. Yeah, so there you go. That's great. Okay, we're actually way over time, aren't we? So
Yes.
I think we should go. We're going to stop here. We're going to have to remember that we got to, this is the one that we have to go to next. And basically we 1, 2, 3, fourth from the bottom, plus we have to go back to the top. Okay? Everybody got that?
Very good.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Okay?
You too.
Rabbi, can I ask you a question after the class is over?
Yeah, let me
After it's
stop the recording and we'll do that.